pathetic.
Nerdrotic.com.
Remember this, Loki? I don't. And I don't know what the hell's going on with Kevin Feige right now. It seems that Marvel is determined to systematically deconstruct everything that made them popular in the first place. And you gotta wonder why. Well, hopefully my Loki review will help answer that question. Now, before we get started, if you like what I do here, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking and sharing the videos. It really does help independent content creators. If you could do that with your favorite YouTuber as well, I'm sure they would appreciate it as much as I do. Just past 350,000 subscribers, and that is thanks to you. Now, let's talk about Loki. So we're here to review a little show called Loki, guest starring Tom Hiddleston. Of course, he wasn't the titular character because the titular character had teats. The pisser about Loki is it had the most potential, and this was the series I was looking the most forward to. Obviously, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I thought Loki could be the Doctor Who of the MCU, and that's how they pitched it, at least in the trailer. Loki ended up being a bait and switch on a couple of levels. In the trailer, they certainly made it look like it was going to be a time-traveling romp and not a series of sitting down at tables and talking. Now, this show ended up being about Loki, just not the one we liked. So, there will be spoilers, there will be crying, there will be feelings in hallways. Dare I say, Marvel's going full CW. This is Loki, the trickster, the god of mischief. You shouldn't have known which way was up in this series. We shouldn't have known which Loki was real. This should have been the ultimate in unreliable narrator. Think Memento meets Inception, except in the Marvel Universe. That would have been pretty cool, but instead we got girl power. That's right, Loki is the most MCU thing in the MCU, and in a lot of ways, it's just as bad as Black Widow. I mean, this show is linear. How could you make a Loki show linear? What am I thinking? This is Disney. I've already gone over the first episode in detail, which you can check out right here, but we will briefly recap the inconsistencies with the beginning. Of course, we started in Endgame, and the minute Loki departed from Endgame, this show departed from anything Marvel. He lands in the CGI Gobi Desert and starts speaking English in Mongolia, when later on in the series, it's shown that Loki is indeed capable of speaking native languages.
Me Norman es Loki.
Unfortunately, the priority wasn't consistency in character or storytelling, it was only in deconstructing Loki. So, within the matter of a couple of minutes, we make Loki look like a bumbling idiot, and this is only the beginning. And of course, Body Positivity Time Cop shows up and punches him in the face in slow motion. Apparently, they're trying to make some sort of statement here, and you would think you wouldn't want to do this with your main character, but it turns out this isn't the main character. What, 30 minutes prior, Loki was fighting the Avengers. Now, at this point, you're thinking, wow, Body Positivity Time Cop must be powerful. She must have some sort of superpowers because they're on planet Earth right now, and Loki still has all of his powers. How did she knock his ass out? Keep that in mind. We'll get back to it. And this is where we meet our surprisingly small recurring cast of characters. Of course, we have the guest star and the companion in his own series, the inconsequential male Loki. Then we are introduced to subordinate Mobius, played by Owen Wilson. He is subordinate to Girl Boss, who I'm going to continue to call Girl Boss, but her name is Ravonna Renslayer, and we'll talk about that later. And, of course, Body Positivity Time Cop. Body Positivity Time Cop works for the TVA, the Time Variance Agency, and she apprehends the very weak and inconsequential male Loki. The TVA guards the sacred timeline. The sacred timeline is controlled by the timekeepers, or so we think. Turns out that inconsequential male Loki is just a variant, and every time a variant occurs, it creates a branch in the sacred timeline that needs to be pruned. Owen Wilson's very subordinate Mobius wants to use this inconsequential male Loki to help find a rogue variant who is ambushing and murdering in cold blood all of the time cops, which look suspiciously like extras hastily put into costumes that don't fit. We also find out that things like the Infinity Stones are rendered useless in the TVA wherever the TVA is, which we never really find out. So This ends up being the first of a lot of scenes where two characters will sit down and talk. In this episode, mainly Loki and Mobius are sitting down and talking, and in this case, we're discussing Loki's feelings. And we watch Loki review Much Better MCU, cry, Mobius wants to know what makes him tick, and eventually we get this. And this.
I'll give you two options, and you can believe whichever one you want. A, because I see a scared little boy shivering in the cold, and you kind of feel bad for that ice runt.
Everything is predetermined, and there is no free will in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Loki is just a scared little boy. But there was one more reveal. He's not the only Loki. Now, yes, I'm just doing the quote-unquote highlights in this review because otherwise, I would be talking about a lot of sitting down and talking because most of the second episode was just that. Girl boss sitting down and talking to Mobius, Mobius sitting down and talking to Loki, Loki sitting down and doing some work by himself, and then Loki and Mobius sitting down and talking. During all this sitting down and talking, which is starting to look suspiciously like drawing this thing out much longer than it needs to be because it wasn't really necessary, we do finally get some necessary information. Subordinate Mobius and inconsequential male Loki figure out that the other Loki variant is hiding out in Doomsdays to hide the fact that they are a living and breathing Nexus event. And we spend the entire second episode leading up to a reveal that we could all see miles away. Oh, sorry, wrong reveal. Just like with the Taskmaster, everyone who has been paying attention could see this coming. It's a female Loki which is much smarter, stronger, independent, and empowered. You go, girl!
This isn't about you.
And no truer words have been spoken in this series. It turns out very capable female Loki has a power that the inconsequential male Loki doesn't have, enchantment, and she was able to get the jump on C20, which apparently not anyone can do because C20 is one of the more formidable time cops. Just look at her. Can't imagine how anyone got the jump on her, especially with the revelation that we get in the next episode. We'll talk specifically about the deceptive trailers from Loki in just a bit, but remember the one scene that looked like it was Vormir and possibly Black Widow from a distance? There was a lot of fan theories, and just like all the other previous Disney Plus shows, they ended up being better than what we actually got on the screen, that we had to pay for, that you had to pay for, that was behind a paywall. I wish it was Black Widow on Vormir. It would have made Black Widow and this show more interesting, but unfortunately, it was all about female Loki. After that shocking reveal that everyone saw coming, inconsequential male Loki followed female Loki to the Time Variance Agency, where she almost made it to the Timekeepers. Remember when Body Positivity Time Cop laid out male Loki?
Get out of my way.
Well, female Loki was able to, in the TVA, without her powers, take out 4 guards. Again, without superpowers. During the fight, male Loki steals female Loki's tempad and they transport to a planet called Lamentis 1. And it's doomed just like the MCU or the MCU, which is one of the doomsdays that female Loki already had pre-programmed into her tempad. So, of course, she blames male Loki for transporting them there. It's almost like they don't want to miss a single opportunity to diminish and destroy male Loki. You know, for a minute, this episode looked promising. There's a bunch of meteors and little meteorites crashing all around him. They run for cover under a truck that's later destroyed. Then they run into a trailer and somehow all of the meteors stop. And for the rest of the episode, the meteors miraculously miss them whenever they need to sit down and have a conversation, which they do for 2 long spells in this episode. I'm sorry, 3 long spells in this episode. And that's only broken up by them walking and talking. In a way, this is like Doctor Who. The entire episode is male Loki following female Loki and asking her questions. So, in the interest of saving time, I will tell you what happened in this episode. Female Loki is pretty amazing. She taught herself magic. Male Loki is bisexual.
You're a prince. Must have been would-be princesses, or perhaps another prince.
A bit of both.
And everyone's a variant in the TVA. We also find out female Loki's master plan, which just so happens to be the entire plot of this entire series.
For years in the making plan was to tear the place down, create the ultimate power vacuum, and then just walk away.
Minus one little detail. There's a flashback scene with little female Loki who is sitting there playing innocently, and then she is interrupted and taken away by the time cops, and one of those time cops is Ravonna Renslayer, girl boss, but at the time she's just a hunter. And in this origin scene, they managed to mix in a little social messaging. Little female Loki is able to escape quite easily by stepping on girl boss's toe, stealing her tempad, and leaving. If you missed this scene, that's completely okay, because a few minutes later, female Loki tells the whole story again to inconsequential male Loki.
I escaped. Stole a tempad and I ran.
Mobius wants to interrogate the formidable Hunter C-20, who was enchanted by the Enchantress, who's really female Loki. Female Loki is able to unscramble the brains of the variants with her enchantment, and they can remember their previous lives. And this happens to C-20, so she had to be offed, and it also happens to Body Positivity Time Cop. While female Loki is recounting the origin we just saw, we find out that she is amazing. Do you know how I know?
You're amazing.
I'm sure glad Loki said that, because I almost forgot the last time he said she was amazing last episode. No! Loki falls in love with himself. It creates a Nexus event, which brings the time cops. They get captured. They get separated. They mention that they have more guards on female Loki than male Loki.
By the way, I should have an equal amount of security. This is insulting.
Although that completely contradicts a couple of days ago when S.H.I.E.L.D. had 20 guards on male Loki? Then we get to the most pivotal scene in the entire series, Loki getting kicked in the balls over and over again by Lady Sif. But before we get to Loki getting kicked in the balls repeatedly, let's recap just some of the humiliations. I don't have time to put them all in.
I specialize in the pursuit of dangerous variants. Like myself. No particularly dangerous variants. You're just a little pussycat.
I am here.
No, I don't care what makes you tick. You're here to help me catch the superior version of yourself, because I see a scared little boy.
You can fix it.
You're not a serious man.
You're right. I'm a god.
You're a clown.
And can you shut up? Just because I have to work with you doesn't mean I want to hear your voice. You idiot! Pathetic.
There's nothing wrong with a little self-deprecating humor and a little self-referential parody. Unfortunately, the MCU has become a parody, though, because it isn't done out of fun or humor. You can feel the disdain for Loki, the disdain for the traditional characters, the disdain for traditional heroes, the disdain for the audience. Again, Loki is a bait and switch on a lot of levels, including the most obvious. Loki doesn't star in his own show, and Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston just being lost little puppies, playing second fiddle to, let's be real here, a couple of bland, uninspiring, contrived characters in Girl Boss and Female Loki. Tell me, did you tune in to see Tom Hiddleston with Owen Wilson, or did you tune in to see Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson tell us how awesome their female counterparts are?
I feel like I'm always looking up to you. I like it. It's appropriate.
Before Loki got kicked in the balls multiple times, he tried to tell Mobius that he's a variant. He didn't believe him, but then later he does when he hears it from Body Positivity Time Cop. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but there's a big subplot between Mobius and Girl Boss. There might be some office romance or something going on. Obviously, they both have past lives. Obviously, Girl Boss knows more than she's letting on, but this goes nowhere. So much so, I don't even want to bring it up because it's pointless to the story. Most of their scenes, as with most of the scenes in this show, are just those two sitting in a room and the scenes are just repetitive. Mobius gets caught going through Girl Boss's temp pad and he gets killed. Female Loki and inconsequential male Loki finally get taken to the Timekeepers, who everyone at this point knew were fake. We find this out after yet another poorly choreographed action scene. They are terrible in this show. Inconsequential male Loki winces at a severed robot head. Male Loki is about to tell female Loki that he loves himself, and then he gets pruned by Girl Boss. There's finally a stinger in this episode, and we finally see other Lokis, the thing they strongly alluded to in the trailers but haven't delivered yet, and we're at the 5th episode. Remember the Loki trailers? Well, I hope you have. I've been playing them throughout this entire review. Remember what they alluded to? That's why I thought this was going to be the best Marvel series, but I am obviously an idiot and naive. Remember the DB Cooper scene, and remember President Loki, especially after that crazy election we had last year. Well, turns out that the scenes you saw in the trailer were pretty much the scenes we saw in this show. Complete throwaway. The DB Cooper scene was just in the first episode when Loki was sitting there watching Much Better MCU, and the multiple Lokis led by President Loki were in this episode for a grand total of about 4 minutes. They ended up fighting each other and they were gone. I know there was little alligator Loki and Kid Loki and Richard E. Grant 616 Loki, who was great, and that's what makes this terrible. When a guest star steals your entire series and has a sacrifice that has more emotional impact than anything else in your series, and it ended up being for nothing. Apparently, when you get pruned, you go to the end of time, where you get eaten by Eliath, a cloud monster, to go into the Cloud Monster Hall of Fame with Galactus and Parallax. Female Loki and Girl Boss had a showdown, but then female Loki pruned herself and she ended up in the same place with Loki, magically finding him pretty quickly. And of course, Owen Wilson's Mobius is still alive, and he ended up just playing Driving Miss Loki this episode. And to pick up where male Loki left off, he started praising her immediately. Just like on the planet Lamentis, where death was raining down on them, we have a giant purple smoke monster eating reality, constantly threatening them, so they have to run, but they always find time to sit down and talk. The Lokis sit down and talk before the other Lokis show up in the very brief scene where we have all of our lovable Lokis together, all of the different variants. They all have one commonality. They're male, and they are a lot of lovable losers. So, of course, we find out that the one key difference, the one thing that might break their losing streak, is the female Loki.
I'm the same as all of you. Have any of you met a woman variant of us?
Sounds terrifying.
Oh, she is. That's kind of what's great about her. She's different.
You know, times are changing. Ladies can do stuff now.
They all fight and kill each other, and then we're down to Kid Loki, Alligator Loki, and 616 Richard E. Grant Loki, which is the best. They were betrayed by Black Loki. What are they trying to say? Driving Miss Loki, Owen Wilson, and female Loki finally find male inconsequential Loki with the 616 Loki, Alligator Loki, and Kid Loki, and they sit down and talk. That's only interrupted by male Loki and female Loki sitting down and talking somewhere else. While male Loki and female Loki sit down and talk, male Loki gets cold.
It's cold.
And I half expected female Loki to conjure him a blanket. Now he conjured himself one, just to remind you once again, what, a couple of days ago, he was in New York doing this.
You want to find out?
Turns out female Loki had a temp pad. She offers it to Loki. He says he's going to stay, so he offers it to Owen Wilson, who goes back to the TVA, and I did not mean that to rhyme. That's the second video in a row I did that. Male Loki and female Loki face off against the giant purple smoke monster, and male Loki stands behind her. And the coolest scene in this entire series is Richard E. Grant 616 Loki mystically rebuilding Asgard to distract the giant purple smoke monster as female Loki and her companion male Loki enchant it. 616 Loki dies, and female Loki and inconsequential male Loki look through a crack in time and space to Dr. Doom's castle? No, we wish. Actually, I don't. No, it's the Citadel at the end of time. I guess I could say the 5th episode was the best for all the wrong reasons. It was the best because it had the promise of what this show was supposed to be but wasn't, and that seems to be the MO of Disney+. We finally make it to the finale. Will we get any answers, or will there be some on-the-nose scene with the bad guy eating an apple? In the finale, are they done putting Tom Hiddleston's male Loki in his place? Absolutely not.
Loki, shut up. I was pruned before you even existed. I have been waiting for this moment my entire life. I just need a second to get my head straight, okay?
Sure. Of course.
She Loki and Boy Loki debate breaking into the castle, but they're let in by Miss Minutes, who offers them everything they wanted. Baby Boy Loki is offered victory against the Avengers and Thanos. Femme Fatale Loki is offered her life back. Of course, girly girl Loki doesn't believe Miss Minutes and says we have our life in our hands and it's all about free will. And we're reminded that absolutely everything in this show and in the MCU has been predetermined. Are we going to eventually get an answer to this? Are we going to find out that that really isn't the case? Or is this episode just going to confirm it? Well, spoilers, it does. After the last temptation of the Loki's, they walk around the castle for a little bit, and then they finally meet a bad guy eating an apple. Miss Loki and Master Loki follow our on-the-nose apple eater into the elevator and then slowly follow him to his office and then slowly follow him to his desk. And at the 12-minute mark, they finally sit down at the desk. And soon as they're about to actually start talking, they cut away to Mobius and Girl Boss. Mobius goes to prune her.
You're of no danger to me.
Of course he isn't, because he's male.
Is that what you think? Let's see. Yep, you're right. Back here again.
Then she takes off. He asks, where are you gonna go? And she said, in search of free will. I could have sworn Girl Boss just said, there's no such thing as free will. Now she's in search of it? Like I said, pointless. There was another scene where Body Positivity Time Cop confronts Girl Boss as, I guess, her real self, a principal of a school. And they don't go back to these scenes again. I don't care enough to be confused. I know they're supposed to be cliffhangers, but one essential thing about a cliffhanger is I have to care about Girl Boss and female Loki, and as they were written, that is impossible. It doesn't get much better from here. We spend the rest of the episode with the two Lokis talking to the unnamed Kang the Conqueror about stuff. It turns out Loki gave us the entire plot back in episode 3.
Your years in the making plan was to tear the place down, create the ultimate power vacuum, and then just walk away.
The only difference was the timekeepers were the unnamed Kang the Conqueror. We can only assume he is Kang because he didn't give us his name. On the nose apple eater unnamed Kang tells us that he paved the way for female Loki and inconsequential male Loki to arrive at that desk, meaning there was absolutely no free will in this show, and there remains no free will in the MCU. Now, I'm assuming this might be the Immortus version of Kang, which most of you are not going to know, and it doesn't really matter anyway. There's a lot of versions of Kang. He is descended from Reed Richards, which should give us all a big hint on just how they're going to cast that Fantastic Four movie. But we're not really sure. It could be the character in name only, just like they did with the Iron Maiden in Black Widow, or the Taskmaster, or Ravonna Renslayer, who just so happens to be a redhead in the comic books. Ginger's side is real. Or the Enchantress from the comics, whose name is Sylvie, who they plucked to make female Loki. In the interest of saving time, because this video has gone on long enough, Immortus or Kang or whoever he is offers our Lokis a deal. It turns out the TVA was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, except it wasn't the timekeepers who was running it, it was Immortus or Kang. He offers them his job, or they could kill him and it will restart the multiverse war, which was started by Kang, Rama Tut, Nathaniel Richards, Immortus, whoever you want to call him. And because they needed to break the monotony, female Loki and male Loki fight. Female Loki wants revenge. Male Loki says, I just want you to think about it. She, of course, kicks his ass. And ultimately, he finishes what he was trying to say before he got pruned. That's right. He says he loves himself, then he kisses himself, and proving that female Loki is the star of the show, she, with Kang's wrist device that she somehow figured out how to use, boots male Loki out of the room, and then she kills Kang Immortus, Nathaniel Richards, Ramatot, whoever he is. Technically, in the credits, it's He Who Remains. The multiverse starts splitting up. Loki gets another good cry in, then he runs over to Mobius and Body Positivity Time Cop, and they have no idea who he is, and we see a giant statue of Kang the Conqueror, and we're gonna get a Loki season 2, and I don't care. And if this is your big bad, if this is the guy you chose to play your next Thanos, I certainly hope he has a lot of range, because Jonathan Majors' performance was awful.
That's the gambit. Stifling order or cataclysmic chaos.
And according to the show, he is supposed to be terrifying.
We found him. Beyond the storm. A citadel at the end of time. He's terrifying.
And Loki, the show about the god of lies, the trickster, the god of mischief, ended up being about female Loki, and it ended up being predictable and boring. This series could have worked, and it should have worked. I have no problem with a kick-ass female Loki as long as we have a kick-ass Loki to go along with it. But it seems that Hollywood, and especially Disney Marvel of late, feels it's necessary to deconstruct and destroy their male characters because they have no respect for their female characters. They have no respect for women. They don't think they can stand on their own along with their male characters. I don't know. Disney, you answer the question. Oh, wait, you already have, by saying that Robert Downey Jr. would have taken away from Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, or Doctor Strange would have taken away from WandaVision. Yet WandaVision, Black Widow, and now Loki have been complete disasters because you have perfected one art: character assassination. Marvel Phase 1 was a complete waste of time. It's already been established that Captain Marvel could have taken out Thanos on her own, or Scarlet Witch, or Monica Rambeau, or better yet, they just could have called Body Positivity Time Cop to smack Loki and kick Thanos in the balls. Marvel has always had a villain problem, but they just took one of their best, Loki, and turned him into inconsequential Loki.
I'm sorry.
You know, the one we were following all through Marvel Phase 1 and thought was actually dangerous, but it turns out that the Avengers were just wasting their time and all they had to do was sit down and talk to him a little bit and they would have cracked him easily. Is Loki woke? No, it's not, but it's filled with intersectional feminist themes. It is filled with Me Too times up Hollywood. And again, that is based on Disney Marvel's virtue signal hiring practices of Kate Herron, and they felt so strongly about her that they showed her the door after season 1. I'm not returning, the UK filmmaker told Deadline in an interview this morning. I always planned to be just on for this, and to be honest, season 2 wasn't in the what? That's something that just came out. Ooh, it sounds like she almost said something she wasn't supposed to, and it sounds like season 2 is a surprise to her. And I'm so excited. I'm really happy to watch it as a fan next season, but I just think I'm proud of what we did here, and I've given it my all. Oh yeah, she was fired. I'm working on some other stuff yet to be announced. So there's that, and then there's story editor and writer for the horrifically bad 3rd episode, intersectional feminist political activist Bisha K. Ali, who also calls herself a stand-up comedian. And while I could not find a single frame of footage of her doing any stand-up comedy or any example of her being even slightly interested in superheroes, I did manage to find some of her comedy on a podcast.
I'm a feminist, but I was almost late to this recording because I stayed up till 7 a.m. binge watching Love Island. I'm a feminist, but this week when a woman confused me for a very, very famous Indian American actress from the US adaptation of The Office, I did not correct her.
And along with the director of Captain Marvel 2, which is now called The Marvels, and former Harvey Weinstein assistant Leslie Headland, following in the long-standing tradition of employees being virtue signal hired at Disney, she had to delete hundreds of tweets. And following in the tradition of the source material, Marvel Comics, who has been trying to shove identity politics, intersectional feminism, and recently CRT down the throats of its readers, leading to cratering sales, the same is going to happen to the MCU. Disney Marvel's silence on what exactly the numbers are for their D+ shows is deafening, and the cracks are already starting to show. Black Widow cratered in its second week, and if you look at the day-to-day, it's going to be even worse in its third week. Dare I say, hashtag Black Widow lost money. It's a recent trend over the last 5 or 6 years that's destroyed Hollywood, trying to shove unlikable characters and politics down our throat. When you have to resort to things like lying to your audience or manipulating your audience, because that's exactly what the bait and switch is, am I right, He-Man fans? Then you failed. Kevin Feige said that Loki would have a major impact on the future of the MCU. What he didn't tell us, that it would destroy the past. Disney didn't start the MCU, but they're sure as hell going to finish it, and they're going to finish it in the most pathetic way, being predictably woke. And the minute we heard that there was going to be a female Loki, we knew exactly what that character was going to be: the far superior, better Loki, the girl who's the key to everything. And that's what makes Loki the most MCU thing in the MCU. It's going to be really interesting to see Disney try to run a superhero franchise without traditional villains or traditional heroes. So the third time was not the charm for Disney Plus, and just like its predecessors, it seemed to have all the right pieces in place. A good concept, a good cast. Unfortunately, everything lives and dies with the writing. Now, they did hire very experienced political hacktivists, and that's why the writing sucks, and that's why we are well into Marvel's worst year. But things aren't going to change until they fall flat on their face, and I guess that's up to us, and we'll have to wait and see.
Well. Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.
If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.